Welcome back to the channel everyone, I'm Retro Yugioh, and in today's video we're going to discuss the best 5 deck choices you can have for the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship Qualifier 2023. Now these decks are not necessarily the best decks of the format, they're just the best choices for the event as they will have the highest success rate. So without further ado, let's get started. For number 5 we're going to start off with Vanquish Soul. Vanquish Soul is what you would call the perfect example of a mid-range deck. It has a high consistency, it has monsters that can give you great interruptions, it also has a very powerful Link 1, and everything can have multiple different effects depending on what you have in hand. They can add almost every problematic card you might come into contact with, while at the same time being able to play a Floodgate, and in addition to that, they have hand traps as well. For this deck, you can see certain things such as consistency cards like Pot of Prosperities, Small Worlds, its own in archetype card in Stake Your Soul, and even the true OG Reinforcement of the Army. Couple together these consistency cards with hand traps like Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, Ghost Bell, even board breakers like Kurakari Div Incarnate, maybe even Infinite Impermanence as well. Then on top of all that, you're able to play cards like There Can Be Only One, which many decks in the current format will have trouble competing against without the use of their side deck. However, there is flaws in this deck, being that it is such a mid-range deck. It doesn't really have a high ceiling for its power, meaning when trading one-for-one resources, this deck just doesn't have the greatest complementary pieces to be able to take full advantage like the other decks on this list. But the deck is still quite respectable when you're playing the tournament, and it is for that reason that I have placed this deck in the number 5 spot. For number 4, we're going with Labyrinth. Labyrinth is by far the best trap control deck of this format. The representation may be a little bit higher, considering they just won German Nationals. Labyrinth also has the ability to play Eradicator Epidemic Virus, which has currently divided the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! Community on whether it should be banned or legal at 3. But for this tournament, you're able to play up to 3 copies. You're also able to have a lot of consistency in what the deck can do, very powerful monsters, and of course, everyone's favorite, be able to play almost any Floodgate you choose. The reason for Labyrinth being this low on the list is just with the notoriety it has received, being able to win the German Nationals, many more players will be well prepared in their side decks, main decks for Labyrinth. You can expect to see many cards that will be impactful versus Labyrinth that may not have been in everybody's deck prior to the German Nationals, but you can expect moving forward to see stuff like Ghost Bell, Ash Blossoms, Harpy's Feather Duster, Lightning Storms, Cosmic Cyclones, and Bestials in almost every single deck of this tournament. For that reason, Labyrinth is not a deck that I would put as capable of being any higher, just because it's coming in with such a large target on its back. For number 3, we have decided to go with Branded Despia. Branded Despia is one of the most adjustable decks for this format. Now, granted, this deck has a lot of flaws. If your opponent has Ash Blossom for your Branded Fusion, and you are unable to respond with Cold by the Grave, or Crossout Designator, or any other option you might have in the deck, that's where it gets a little bit tricky, and you probably will lose those games. However, if you're able to resolve your full combo, and then set up locks going first, like the Gimmick Puppet lock versus combo control decks, and maybe even the spicy tech of Jinzo versus the trap decks, then that would be what we call a very powerful deck that has the ability to counter and adapt to almost every situation. In addition, the deck can also take full advantage of the new card from Battles of Legend, Monstrous Revenge, called Duality. This allows you to summon powerful fusion monsters like Red Eye's Dark Dragoon, or other Floodgate monsters like Herald of the Arclight, without the need to use a Dark Magician in your deck as a brick. So you've further strengthened the consistency and power of your deck while reducing the chances of it bricking. Of course, Ash Blossom still being the powerful staple in every main deck of the format will be something you have to contend against. But if you're able to avoid that, then your deck can take you all the way into the finals. It has a very powerful go first engine, and go second you will have cards like Bestials, which are high impact in the format in your side deck. For number 2, we're going with a deck which has almost everything you could want in a deck, and that is Sprite Runic variants. Sprite Runic has currently got 2 different variants which are both equally as viable for the format. First variant is For Hire Sprite Runic, a deck that uses the For Hire engine to destroy, draw, and interrupt the opponent. Or you have the Live Twin variant of the deck, which can draw, destroy, and interrupt the opponent. Both of these decks are very powerful at what they aim to do, and they complement each other very well in all aspects of the game. This deck, in other words, has no glaring weakness. It is not really affected by hand traps, and it is quite capable of playing through things like Evenly Matched or Dark Ruler No More. These are board breakers which you'll have to consider when building your deck. Sprite is just one of these decks which has the best overall matchup, not really weak against anything and capable of putting out very powerful turn 1 boards, as well as having the Runic engine for consistency, as well as the Live Twin and or Higher engine for more drawing and more consistency. Before we get to number 1, I'm going to give you 2 sleeper options you may want to consider. Dragon Link and Rika Sun Avalon. Both of these decks are very similar for this tournament. They both are expected probably to have lower representation, but for the players that do decide to bring these decks for the events, you can expect them to be true masters of their craft. And in the hands of a very well-prepared duelist and very well-practiced duelist, it is not hard to see these decks being able to just outright outpace you with terms of combo, or just interrupt you at points where you are maybe unaware of what they can do. But due to their low representation, they aren't expected to make the top cut. However, if one of them is to make the top cut, it's not hard to see that they will end up in the finals or even winning the event, just based off of the fact that most players are unaware of the true capabilities of these decks, and that's why I have to give them a sleeper option. Not powerful enough to necessarily win the event, but if they are there, you might get caught off guard. And it's time for number 1. To no one's surprise, the number 1 best choice for the event, not the best deck, but the best choice is Kashtira. Not only is this deck one of the most powerful decks of the format, but it will also have the highest overall top cut representation. I reasonably expect this deck to have upwards of 50% in top cut representation. I would be surprised if it's anything less than that. And for that reason, the overall representation of Kashtira will most likely carry it to the finals. Now, I don't think it's necessarily the most powerful deck. It's very consistent at what it does. It can set up a lot of interruption. It's Kashtira. We all know what it does. Just because it doesn't have the zone lock capability doesn't mean it can't outpace you in other ways. But this deck is just very powerful in what it does. It's also going to have a high representation and high top cut conversions. And for that reason, Kashtira is the most expected deck to win one of these events. But guys, these are just my opinions. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. And I'm Retro Yugioh. Like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.